Welcome back to the Racial Draft Podcast. I am your host, Michael Ford, and keep it low key this week. It is April 14th, 2024. If you listen to Lesson Podcast 9, it's probably later than that. However, we're going to do what we do every week, change the complexion of the comic book universe one draft pick at a time via the Racial Draft. Hopefully, this is not your first episode. If so, apologize. However, we're just gonna get right into it. We're gonna talk a little bit about the second round of the season 7 Dynasty Draft. For those uninitiated, the Dynasty Draft is where the different delegations draft their characters to hold on to in more or less perpetuity. I wouldn't say perpetuity because trades can happen. And there are other mechanisms by which a dynasty drafted player can be lost into the pool of available characters. But we'll get into that as we go along. However, it's the second round. This is the third season that we've had this dynasty draft, so there are quite a few characters that are represented as part of their dynasty rosters. And we might get into it here and there, pick by pick. So if you're questioning how obscure these characters are, part of the reason why, or part of the reason that some of these characters might be a little bit less mainstream is that they are, we're getting deep, we're digging into crates, if you will, when it comes to the characters. So right off top, speaking of, I wouldn't say deep in the crates, starting off with the round with the Native American delegation. Their pick was John Proudstar, aka Thunderbird. He was one of the early, I wouldn't say original, but one of the early X-Men. He had the unfortunate predicament of having died, and he was recently brought back in the Krakoa era, brought back and somewhat reinvented. Obviously his younger brother, James Proudstar, aka oh wow, I just drew a blank on James Proudstar's it'll come to me. But his younger brother kind of picked up his slack a little bit and kind of fulfilled the Proudstar legacy. But now that the elder brother's back, big brother, big bro, Thunderbird, like I said, he's reinvented himself. He's a lot angrier than his brother is, having been dead for, a number of years. So it does remain to be seen where the future holds for him, particularly as we hit the post-Krakoa, I think it's called From the Ashes era of the X-Men. Who knows if he will actually survive the Krakoa Orchis War. He's somewhat active in X-Men Unlimited, if you've been following that series. So he's still got storylines, he's still doing his thing. But obviously not as much as James Proudstar. And it's really bothering me. I'm sure that the moment I start Googling what his code name is, it shall come to me, but I still have to do it. So bear with me for a second. Warpath. Thank you. Thank you, Google. Anyway, so we'll get right into it as far as what the people feel. I'm a little disappointed with you, the people, the listeners, but if you're listening live, you still got 10 hours to cast your vote, whether you strongly approve, somewhat disapprove, or strongly disapprove of this pick. As of now, we're only at 71.4% approval rating for John Proudstar to remain Native American. So like I said, that's 28.6% that is somewhat disapproving of John Proudstar staying Native American. But to be honest, I'd like to know what's behind that. So if you previously cast that vote, get in there and explain yourself. Or again, I'll mention again that we do have an email address, racialdraftpodcast@gmail.com. If you'd rather be a little bit more anonymous, I will here and there withhold people's names if they upon request. But I definitely would like to hear an explanation as to why even a slight or somewhat disapproval of John Proudstar being Native American is merited. I'll keep going into the second pick of the round. This one, I'm struggling with the logic here, if I'm being honest. Not that this isn't a character that has some potential future in the comic world, but just as to what in this character specifically is, that this delegation identifies with, and that character is Elizabeth Lizzie Prince, the daughter of Wonder Woman, and as of now, her name is Trinity. We do not know much about the character as of yet. Most of her stories are taking place in sort of a flash forward. We don't know yet who her father is. Again, we only know that she's Wonder Woman's daughter. We know she has superpowers, and we know that she considers Damian Wayne and Jonathan Kent, these super sons, as her brothers. So she's part of, one might call it a new Trinity, a next generation Trinity, which is a little weird because her name is Trinity. So hopefully we'll learn more about this character and her origins, what she stands for or will stand for in the future, and to what extent her values were or were not instilled by Diana, Wonder Woman, who, at least in some of the stories, she's still around, but in other stories, as she's older, her mother's not around. So her story is yet to be written, and perhaps it's because her story is yet to be written, and she's more of a blank slate, then maybe that's what's, for me at least, a little bit perplexing about the pick. Not to say that it couldn't work, but it's more to say that at least as the character exists now, there's not a lot to latch on to. So I would be very curious as to how the Latinx delegation would be looking to ascribe an identity, a racial identity to Trinity beyond her. Obviously, something as simple as, well, if we find out who her dad is Latino. And maybe it's just as simple as that. But for now, we don't have that information, and I'm struggling myself with whether my own personal approval of the pick. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And because of that, I am now looking at a 50-50 split, 50-50 approval, 50-50 disapproval. So it does kind of track with me, where I'm sort of like, mm, mm, mm. So, we'd love to hear from you, Latinx delegation. We'd love to know what you imagine, um, you know, what you imagine is the proper way to represent Latina Trinity. One character that we actually did get a little bit elucidation is shout out to Randy from the Black delegation. We talked about this in tandem with Magneto, who was drafted earlier on in the season, in the main season draft by the Black delegation, and we did talk about the idea of Polaris being drafted by the Black delegation, given that her story is not at all tied to the Holocaust like her father is, and it is more tied to I wouldn't even say legacy of her father, but she grew up as an American. She kind of grew up as an orphan, and her experience is much more tied to the present day. And I think that, given that she's more American and more tied to the American experience, her having some of her father's militancy, but being more in tune with the struggles of what it would be like to be a Black woman in America, would provide more than enough impetus, or more than enough validation, if you will, for Polaris being Black. but for that matter, it could provide, any woman of color, honestly, could potentially portray polaric. So it's not specifically unique to her as a black woman, but it could definitely still work. So I'm not shocked that the people don't quite see the vision, because they would have had to listen to our episode of the podcast from a couple weeks ago to get that explanation. Hopefully, in the day or so that is left in the approval poll, the Randy or someone else from the black delegation kind of gets in there, explains what they're shooting for. But as of now, 62.5 approval rating, with all 62.5 strongly approving, and the somewhat disapproving coming in at 37.5%. From the black delegation, we hop on into the Jewish delegation. This is a pick that the Jewish delegation has made before. And, it's one of those characters, I think, that doesn't particularly need a lot of explanation as to how to graft the identity onto the character. I mean, this is a character that I don't believe any. We'll get right into it. The Jewish delegation drafted Jane Foster. And like I said, I don't believe that it's been firmly established that Jane Foster is not Jewish. So for that reason, I don't think there's a lot in her story that conflicts with the headcanon of her even being Jewish. Obviously, she was portrayed in live action by a Jewish actress in Natalie Portman in a number of Thor movies. I believe at least one Avengers movie. So to the extent that she's not her powers are not tied to her religion, and she does not do a lot of touting her background and also or her ethnicity. So I think this is a situation where it doesn't diminish the character in any way. It just provides an opportunity for representation, and is a representation that we've already seen. So it really, in my mind, doesn't really kind of merit disapproval. People were a little more down on it than I expected. 62.5% approval rating for Jewish Jane Foster, with 62.5 strongly approving, 25% somewhat disapproving, and 12.5 strongly disapproving of Jewish Jane Foster. With respect to the fan cast, they kept it simple. The Jewish delegation did. They stuck with Natalie Portman being the perceived casting for the character, and that got an approval rating of 85.7%, with 71.4 strongly approving and 14.3 somewhat approving, and then 14.3 somewhat disapproving of the pick. So but on for the fan cast. We will move on from the Jewish delegation to the Southeast Asian delegation, to where they draft. Well, I wouldn't say the pick is particularly controversial. We'll get right into it. They drafted with their pick character that you might only know by his superhero name of Shatterstar, but he actually does have a name. He's the Vidra 7. He is from Mojo World. He is a clone of Longshot, who's actually out here undrafted. So, he's Southeast Asian delegation. Might as well scoop him up as well. I mean, can't really, genetically, it's really difficult to have one without the other, unless Mojo is engaging in some creative cloning. But Vidra 7, Shatterstar, East Asian representation. I mean, obviously, there's no reason that he couldn't be something other than white. And in fact, I would argue that a lot of his iconography is kind of tied to, samurai, anime. The influences are there. So I think that having him basically be a real life anime character, who happens to be East Asian, really kind of brings it together, brings together the different head canon with the actual canon. So I have no reason to disapprove of the pick. And the people are kind of on that side, 81.8 approval, with all 81.8 strongly approve, and then there's the 18.2 just looks at how he looks in the comic, I would assume, and say, nope, not for me. Now, with respect to the fan cast, they went ahead and they sort of did what was the other people did. They stuck with, well, this is a character who was portrayed by an actor in live action. We'll stick with it, and that would be Louis Tan. Now, I got to be honest. I I think Louis Tan has been good in some roles and not good in other roles. I think that the character of Shatterstar probably requires a little bit more depth in his portrayal than what I've seen from Louis Tan, who traditionally is, in my eyes, like plays villains really well. And I think that when the way he was depicted in the Deadpool movie, he was kind of played for laughs. He was kind of played for jokes to, not be someone that should be taken seriously. And, I didn't mention this before, but I think I should mention it now. This is, it's not relatable to his race per se, but, he's part of a pretty prominent same-sex relationship with Richter, on again, off again, but back on again as we speak. And a big part of his story now is his relationship with Richter. And I mean, obviously, I'm not here to say that every role that's played, every character that's LGBTQ should be played by an LGBTQ actor. I would that's a lot to put on every actor. But I mean, again, I just don't know if Louis Tan has the range for that. I haven't seen it. Maybe you in listener world have, and by all means, go ahead. You've got enough time to get in there and cast your votes for approving. But for me personally, I like Louis Tan in certain roles. I just don't see him in this role. And I think that we can do better with respect to casting an East Asian Shatterstar. So I personally would like to see a better approach. But people, they're fine with it. As of now, they are at 70% approval rating for Louis Tan as Shatterstar, with 50% strongly approving, 20% somewhat approving, 20% somewhat disapproving, and 10% strongly disapproving. We'll keep on trucking from one character to another. This is a character that I was surprised to see was still out here, especially because this is a character that a lot of people have headcanoned in this particular manner. So much so that one of the creators, kind of took that headcanon to heart and made it explicit. Obviously, it was set in an alternate timeline, so it hasn't been confirmed canonized in the mainstream DC universe. But we are talking about Terry McGinnis, Batman Beyond, who was imagined by quite a few fans of the show. I've actually never seen the show. Shh, don't tell anybody. But headcanon as a multiracial character. And the multiracial delegation went ahead and drafted this character for their Dynasty Draft to kind of hold on to that idea. Terry McGinnis being imagined in moving forward as a Eurasian, as part white, part Asian, as many people kind of see him. Still trying to figure out exactly who the ideal casting would be for him, but I do think that given a lot of what I've seen, you know, Asian iconography in the futuristic Gotham that has played itself out in the show. For what, again, having not seen it, but only having seen clips of it, I think that it would be fitting to have multiracial Batman Beyond. Particularly, I mean, this has come up before with respect to Batman. Given how much of his training, how sprinklings of Orientalism have made their way into the Batman mythos, it's probably right that there be a member of the that family legacy, if you will, that kind of counterbalances the Orientalism by actually offering some manner of Asian American representation. So for that, I personally strongly approve of the pick. I think that all people who are headcanoning would probably strongly approve of the pick, but they haven't made their way over to the draft in numbers that they should. So go ahead, cast your vote, share the poll. There's still a couple days left to get that approval number up. Because as of now, the approval number is only 71.4. And that is, 71.5. And that is a 42.9 strongly approved, 26.6 somewhat approved, and 26.6 somewhat disapprove of multiracial Batman Beyond. We are already deep into the round. We're at pick 7 of the round, and this is what one of the characters that we like to talk about as a defensive pick. The white delegation has made a number of defensive picks this time out, which is well appreciated. There are quite a number of white characters, so it's always great when they can be discerning about the characters that they feel like their stories are enhanced by their continued whiteness. And this character is not only a character who I believe story works by virtue of whiteness, but also is a character that definitely has big things coming in the foreseeable future and has already kind of had a bit of a blow up, and that's Agatha Harkness. You might know Agatha from WandaVision. You might have known her from her incarnations in the comics, where she was a much, much older woman. But, in trying to align how she was brought to life by Catherine Hahn in the WandaVision series, she was recently DH, I would say about a year and a half ago. So now she's been able to play around a little bit more in a more active role. And less, not to be ageist, but I think that being younger means that she can be involved in more physical showdowns with the younger characters, even though she's still canonically hundreds and hundreds of years old. What I would went back to in terms of discussing her stories is, even though her character is a lot older than, she was active in Salem, Massachusetts during the age of the Salem witch trials. And I think that unless we incorporate kind of shapeshifting into her abilities, which obviously she's a witch, they could do that. Having her be at least ethnically identifiable as white in a world at a time where whiteness was currency, sort of fits for her, if we're being honest. She doesn't seem to have a lot of, even in her more heroic incarnations, hasn't really had a lot of empathy for marginalized people, except the extent to which witches might be considered marginalized. So again, I think that it's probably right for Agatha Harkness to be, if not white fully, at least white passing. So, for me, her staying within the white delegation makes a ton of sense. And what also makes a ton of sense is that, to the extent that Catherine Hahn, is the character who made this, is the actress who made this character mainstream, it does kind of follow that she would continue portraying this character in the light that we have grown accustomed to, and continuing to, work her magic on our hearts, so to speak. I should have said what the approval rating was. So 80% approval rating for Agatha Harkness remaining white, 70% strongly approve, 10% somewhat approve, and 20% somewhat disapprove. With respect to fan cast, this one was shocking for me, honestly, because I'm only looking at 76.9% approval rating for Catherine Hahn. I would have expected at least 90% approval rating for her portrayal. So again, if you feel otherwise, get on to oh, I didn't even mention all the places you can vote. Obviously, if you've been watching us live, you can vote on twitter.com or whatever that other vote-like address is. But you can also cast your vote at racialdraft.com, which is our main website, the main hub, where you can see all of the past votes, all the past picks, and all the past polls going back to the first season. There's a couple picks in there that haven't quite updated, so don't come after me for those. But for most recent seasons, you can get all of the current rosters and all of the current picks from this wrap up for this season and for previous seasons. And the advantage of making that your hub is that you can also find the podcast. You can also find, like I said, it's a lot more comprehensive in terms of figuring out who's representing your demographic, your delegation. So I urge you to show love in both locations. Obviously, if you're watching us on YouTube, you know that we have a YouTube channel, and you can smash that like button, subscribe, do all those things to expand our audience, and bring in, make your voices known, and in a variety of ways, so that it's not just me talking into the void every week. I love being able to interact with fans and interact with other people in the community, so that we can make this a broader discussion than just what I think. So I'll turn off the soapbox for now, and I will work my way to another defensive pick, but this one's a little more controversial of a defensive pick, and you'll find out why. The 8th pick of the Dynasty Draft is Nathaniel Richards. Now, you might say, Nathaniel Richards, that name rings a bell. Yes, Nathaniel Richards is in fact also the name of Reed Richards' father, but we're not talking about that Nathaniel Richards. Wait, Nathaniel Richards, isn't he also the real name of Kang the Conqueror? Why, yes, he is. However, for this pick, we're not talking about Kang the Conqueror. We're actually talking about his alternate timeline predecessor when he was younger. I know, comics, right? But yes, young Kang, aka Iron Lad, aka one of the founding Young Avengers, for the Swana Mena delegation. So essentially, this is a character that, generally speaking, has had roots in ancient Egypt. He's a character that obviously he's been depicted as white, so I'm not gonna go that far. But he's also been depicted as brown. And I think that where things get a little bit tricky, of course, is that we have the MCU Kang the Conqueror, who was, I don't believe, yes, so we did get a version from the multiverse. We did get a variant of Kang who was an Iron Lad, even though he was the same age as Kang. So we haven't gotten a youthful incarnation of Kang, but that Kang, along with many others, was portrayed by the embattled actor, former Marvel actor, no longer, Jonathan Majors. So I think most people are speculating that to the extent that that character is recast, he will be recast by another black actor. But given that Kang is a character that's been depicted across a number of forms of media, not just in the MCU, there's a little bit of wiggle room. Like the delegation had the opportunity to kind of draft him in previous seasons. They chose to sort of let him slip back into the pool after the Jonathan Majors situation unfolded, which again makes a lot of sense. His value as a character has plummeted over the last year. I mean, obviously that movie Kang Dynasty is still the official name of the movie, but there have been a lot of discussions about the future of that movie and about the future of how prominent that character is going to be versus, you know, I would say a year and a half ago. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say exactly how these are going to play out with the character, but I think that to the extent that Iron Lad is still a character that has some cachet alongside Kang as his predecessor. I think that he's worth holding on to, particularly by the Swana Mena delegation, who do not have a lot of canonically, you know, I mean, again, the term Middle Eastern has kind of fallen out of favor, but at least North African characters or Southwest Asian characters, there aren't a lot to speak of that are being represented. So if need be for them to claim, a character that's a little bit distressed asset, let's say. Let's call him a distressed asset, so to speak. Who knows? Maybe things will pick up for Kang in the future. Future. Anyway, 57.1% approval rating for Swana Iron Lad, 42.9 somewhat disapproving of the pick. We move past Iron Lad into another repeat pick, and this repeat pick comes from the Polynesian delegation. Having had an opportunity to talk to Tamati, one of the delegates from the Polynesian delegation, about exactly what we would be looking for in terms of thinking about this character, Gamora, representing the Polynesian delegation. Obviously, one of the tenets of Gamora's story is being the sole survivor of a genocide against the people, and having been raised by Thanos, depending on when you were introduced to the character, to become the most dangerous woman in the galaxy. Now, clearly, she's an alien, so to the extent that any kind of ethnicity is being grafted onto her, it's being done so out of spirit of coding and canon. I mean, coding and headcanon rather than, sort of actual canon. So, to the extent that there are any number of cultural reference that could be incorporated into the character's design to evoke one of the, some Polynesian culture, that's better. That's a conversation better left to Polynesian people. I'm certainly not qualified to do it, but at the same time, I certainly don't think this is a character who needs to be coded as white. And wouldn't you know it? I mean, she's been portrayed by a a multiracial Black woman since her live action inception. So clearly, she's been already portrayed as a person of color. So I think that there's more than enough room for her to be portrayed as a woman of color of Polynesian descent. Not necessarily a strong case, but a case nonetheless. The people are at least right now split 50% approval rating for Polynesian Gamora. I get it. Not a strong case for why she should be Polynesian. But again, I don't think there's a strong case for why she shouldn't be. 38.3% strongly approve, 16.7% somewhat approve, and 50% somewhat disapprove. And that brings us to the final pick of the round, which, gotta be honest, big fan of the South Asian delegation. I've liked a lot of their picks this season. This one is a little baffling. I'd love to have someone in the South Asian delegation on podcast to kind of help us out with this one, because their pick, and this is a dynasty pick, which means they're drafting this character to hold on to. Alexei Shostakov, who you might know better as the Red Guardian. Now, Red Guardian is a character who is essentially the Soviet propaganda version of Captain America. In the aftermath of the war, the USSR saw what Steve Rogers meant to the American cause and said, let's get one of those for us. And because of how deeply tied to their culture as a propaganda figure he is, I think it does somewhat stretch. I think it does somewhat stretch credulity for them to have chosen someone to be their propaganda figure who doesn't embody um, Russian culture. I mean, obviously, yes, there are any number of different races who have lived in Russia and subscribe to the Communist Party, who have subscribed to the Communist Party over the decades, and would be happy to serve in some capacity in having expanded their reach during the Cold War, but particularly the Red Guardian as their, for lack of a better term, Captain Russia. I think that I think it's a hard sell to say that they would have entrusted that mantle uh, to someone of South Asian descent. I think there are other members of the Winter Guard who are probably a little bit better suited for that role. I'm sorry, not for that role, but for that uh, representation in terms of headcanon. It's a no for me, dog. Is where I'm at. But maybe you feel different, listeners. If you feel like a strong case can be made, or even a not so strong case can be made for South Asian Red Guardian, by all means, write in, hit up the mentions, hit up the emails, go ahead. And most importantly, with almost a week left, you have more than enough time to cast your vote, share your poll, share your poll. Whoa, that's not what I wanted to say. But yes, vote in the poll. Make the poll available for other people to vote on both on the website and on social media. Make your voice known with respect, particularly to Red Guardian, but overall to all of the picks as they continue to roll out. By the time you listen to this podcast in podcast land, we probably have started out the third round of the Dynasty Draft. So, go ahead and subscribe to the channels. Go ahead and frequent the website so you can see these picks as they happen. We are also found, in addition to Twitter and the website, racialdraft.com, and YouTube. We're also on Instagram. We're also on TikTok. We're also on Threads. So there are a number of places you can go to get your racial draft fix, including anywhere you get a podcast. So by all means, subscribe to the podcast, share them, like them, comment on them. Just give us all the feedback all the time. But that's where we're going to end it. That was the 10th pick. Doesn't seem like I should stick around that much longer. So I'm going to, leave you with this. We'll be back next week. Same race time, same race channel. But until then, all things are possible.